Welcome to the ConTejas Code podcast, where we dive deep into code, learn practical skills, celebrate the beauty of engineering, and eliminate imposter syndrome. I'm Tejas Kumar, and I'm an AI engineer at IBM, previously at Vercel, Spotify, Zeta, and more. Today on the podcast, my guest is Faris Aziz. Faris is the organizer of ZurichJS, a conference in Switzerland, and he's also a staff engineer at Smallpdf, where he works on millions of payments for millions of users at massive scale. Faris is also a conference speaker and somebody who is well versed with adapting and having a resilient mindset. Faris became, as we learned in the podcast, Faris became a manager at age 21 and had to figure it out on his own. He would then go on to build a career ladder that was used by the entire organization even to this day. Faris also was a top-tier CrossFit athlete and trainer who, because of health conditions, lost all his fitness, and was forced into a season of recovery where he couldn't do much and just had to somehow find the strength to focus on his intellect and his mental work, aka software engineering. And Faris has come a long way. Faris is now a conference speaker, a conference organizer, and a very productive and resilient person. In the episode today, we talk about that. We talk about how does one cultivate a growth mindset in the face of becoming a manager, maybe too young. We talk about taking care of your body and regulating your emotions so you can serve the people around you better, either professionally or personally, or even if you're doing something like organizing a conference, how can you actually be useful to the people around you by taking care of yourself? We also talk about how do you get promoted. And finally, we talk about the conference itself, what it's like to organize a conference, especially because this is the first time ZurichJS is run. If you are interested in growing your career, if you're interested in the skills of self-regulation and taking care of yourself so you can be a better person to those around you, or if you're interested in organizing a conference, this episode is for you. As usual, the ConTejas Code podcast is all about applying an engineering mindset to get the most out of life in everyday things. And that's kind of what we're doing here with Faris. So we hope you enjoy it. Faris also, we've spent actually the entire weekend together. He was actually on in my home, sleeping here in our guest room, and we spent a lot of time together. And so if there is familiarity in this episode, it's because it is familiar. Also, on the ConTejas Code podcast, we want to do this more often, just in-person episodes with friends, and consider this an invite. If you're interested or you know someone interested, there's a form in the show notes that you can fill out if you want to be a guest in person or even online, although we prefer in person. And you would come to Berlin and you would sit across from me and we'd do an in-person episode. I would love that. And I know many of the listeners would as well. So if you're interested, the form is in the show notes. If this is on YouTube, then it's under the like button. Of course, this stuff costs money, and I would love, frankly, to be able to just like fly people out here and take care of all the logistics costs. We're not there yet, but this can happen with sponsors and partners. In fact, this entire podcast is separate to my day job, and the way it's even sustainable is through partners and sponsors. Let's take a moment to acknowledge our main sponsor right now, and then we'll continue with the episode. The ConTejas Code podcast is brought to us by Code Crafters. Code Crafters is an amazing way to level up your coding skills. How it works is you pick a developer tool, something like Git or Redis or Docker, one of these tools that you don't even need to know. And then you pick a programming language, also which you don't need to know, JavaScript, Python, TypeScript, Go. And then what they'll teach you, they'll hold your hand as you build the tool with the programming language. They'll help you do both. And at the end, you get really good at the tool, but also really good at the language because you understand the ins and outs of the tool, but you also understand the ins and outs of the programming language you've chosen, and you just become a better engineer all around. They have a generous free tier. If you want to start paying and pay less, you get a great discount if you visit the link in the show notes or just type it. It's tej.as/codecrafters. Faris organizes ZurichJS, which is happening in September. And of course, we're an affiliate of that. We've partnered with ZurichJS to bring you this episode, but also give you a good discount. If you'd like a discount to attend ZurichJS and buy a ticket, all of those links are in the show notes as well. We invite you to look at them. For now, let's get on with the discussion with Faris, and I can't wait to hear what you think. Faris Aziz, welcome to ConTejas Podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here.
Bro, this has been in the making for so long. I'm so excited because we've been hanging out for the past few hours, chatting, breakfast, and all of this, and so I'm hyped.
100%. This has been in the making since like at least last November, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like we've spent so much compressed time between like what the stack last year and then like meeting in Geneva. And we're going to be spending even more time this year together.
Yeah.
A lot of exciting stuff going on.
Yeah, I'm hyped. You're putting on a conference that you've organized. Congrats.
Thank you very much. Yeah, ZurichJS Conf happening this September. It's going to be really, really fun. And we're really excited about a lot of things going on into it.
That's so exciting. I mean, I was surprised to find out that this is the first time you're doing it.
This is exactly the first time we're doing it. And then I was thinking about it too. Like, the first time I ever spoke publicly was at a meetup, not at a conference, at React Advanced London in February 2024. And sort of within 2 years, I've gone from speaking for the first time to announcing organizing my own conference in sub 2 years. And that's a crazy feeling.
So let's start right at the beginning, because for a lot of people, you're this guy who's organizing a conference. You're speaking at conferences. You're quite active in the tech space. You're Next.js and all you're specialist. You're well established. But I think a lot of people would like to, before they listen to you on a podcast, would like to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah.
Right. We've talked off camera and off mics about sort of early career stuff, about how you were in a way forced into it by health circumstances. Very similar to me, for those who know my story. Let's just start there, because a lot of people are like trying to decide, I want to get into tech, or maybe they even got into tech, and they don't know how to progress. So let's go right to the beginning. What were some of the early things that led to today directly?
So I'll start with a couple of things. First, I'll be straight up. I'm 25 years old. So some people, I've had guess that I'm up to 32, up to 30, something like that. My journey into tech, like my first tech job I ever started was in June 2020. And before that,
when you were how old?
I was 19 years old.
Wow, you started at 19.
Yeah. So I started at 19. And that was my first professional experience. And before that, I was in high school. I graduated high school in 2019. Yeah, that's crazy. And that was, as you can guess it, like just right before COVID was happening. So I graduated high school. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had some inkling that I wanted to be computer science. Didn't really know what that meant. And I loved breaking things too. So I loved pulling things apart. I would love like taking drones and breaking them and then putting them back together. And I created this little security camera with plugged in some old drone pieces together, and then was able to stream it to a phone so I could put it outside my room to be able to detect when my parents were going to see if they were going to come into my room to check if I was doing my homework or not. And so this was always this feeling that I loved building things that solved a need. And that eventually then translated, to computer science. But I didn't know what I wanted to do when I got out of high school. And so one of the things that my father suggested to me is, hey, if you don't know what you want to do, take a gap year, try out this coding bootcamp thing. It was called Flatiron School. And I was like, you know what, let's give it a shot. And I also wasn't the best person in high school. I was really, really, really bad at maths, English. My French grades were better than my English grades for some reason. I don't know why, but that's just how things turned out to be. And so my university options were too limited. And so I decided to go for the coding bootcamp and went into the coding bootcamp, moved from Switzerland to London, started over there, and was so overwhelmed because there was somebody who was previously a lawyer, now retrained to be a software engineer. Somebody else that had a doctorate in music and playing the piano. It was like people from incredible backgrounds, career backgrounds. And I was just there like, hey, I did some CrossFit before. I've done high school. Let me learn this coding thing. And Flatiron was really brutal in the sense that they were like 5 or 6 modules. It was 4-ish months long. And if you failed a module, you only had one failure that you were allowed. You'd be set back 2 weeks. If you failed a second time, you were out of the program, at least in person, because you could not keep up with the pace, and you'd be shifted to the online program that they have. I failed the first module. And like when it comes to like code executing or not, it either runs or it doesn't. So there's no like you met 70% of the criteria in a multiple choice. Like either when you ran and were writing Ruby code back then, like it either ran or didn't. And so it's sort of like you have to get 100% on the exam or not. And so I didn't work out. I was super frustrated. I got set back. And that was a big awakening for me. I'm like, oh my God, if I get kicked out of this program, it's like I don't even have this opportunity to redefine what I'm actually good at, because I always thought that having the plethora of subjects in high school or in the GCSEs or the IB program that I did was there's 6 or 7 subjects and I don't like all of them. I'm good at what I like. So I was like, I actually like this thing. I like building stuff. If I'm not good at what I even like, what does it even mean? And so I really I put my head down and figured it out. I spent a lot of time learning. I rethought stuff. Going through the first module again was actually a fantastic setback, because I was able to relearn through the eyes of the new cohort that was coming in. And then when I came to the end of it, I passed all the subsequent modules and I actually built something that solved a problem that I had, which was I love CrossFit. I wanted to build a CrossFit app booking class system, and that was my final project. Which then, this is a long story settling into how I got into my first job. That I graduated actually 2 weeks before the last cohort that ever graduated the Flatiron London school, because that London school actually shut down because of COVID.
Oh, wow.
So COVID started. I think I graduated in March 2020, and I got a call from my parents, and they're like, "There's something going on. You got to look at the news." I was in disbelief, and I'm like, you got to go back to Switzerland," and that was the right call to make at the time. And so I went back, had these coding skills, was playing around with stuff, and what was so interesting about that time was that it sort of created the perfect space to build a product, which was all the gyms had to shut down in Switzerland because of being in close contact. What was allowed at that time, or when they eased up the rules, was being able to host outdoor group classes or being able to hang out in groups of 5. And so this opened up an opportunity to, with 2-meter COVID distances, host outdoor classes in some outdoor field. And actually all the, coaches had lost their jobs at that point. They weren't able to operate. Maybe they were doing online classes. And so I was like, what can I do with these new skills? And so I booked a platform to be able to book CrossFit classes, and initially hosted them over Zoom, and built it up with Stripe and connected it all up together. It was the worst. I didn't understand what webhooks were back then.
Right.
And so the way I would determine a successful payment was I would, and go to the success page, go fetch something from Stripe. But if you refresh the success page, it would double your credits because you'd be credited for something every single time. I didn't know this stuff. Don't even ask me how I handled authentication. But yeah, it was an incredible experience, because what coaches were doing is that they created WhatsApp group chats and they used cash to deal with stuff. It was inefficient, and I was like, we can do something better here. And so I built it for myself, and I started hosting outdoor classes, and then it evolved from a pet project to being like, hey, there's this Stripe connected accounts feature. How can I actually have multiple people onboarded and have their money actually distributed and paid out to their bank accounts when they accumulated it from booking classes? And I didn't know what observability and monitoring was back then either. So when somebody had a bug, it was, this is not working. I get a message on WhatsApp, and I actually would stay with them after the CrossFit class, sit in a corner outside and be like, can you please open your laptop? Oh, go on this Chrome thing. You can click here, this inspect thing. You can open the network tab, and I'll just take their computer. Let me look at it myself and debug it, and take a photo with my phone of all the logs, the console logs. I'll go back home and I'll be like, okay, let's see if we can reproduce this. I had no idea what I was doing, but I kept on interviewing for jobs at that point. And I landed this interview with this company and this agency, web agency or TV agency called FX Digital. And I was just so passionate about this project that I built that I never wrote a single line of code in the interview process.
Wow.
And I got my first job like that, because they were like, show us something you've built. And I read them through every single line of code with passion and with purpose and with story. And they were like, you could not have made this up. And you could not have stolen this. So there's clearly something associated with it. And it was an incredible start.
And they were probably like, oh, what you did with this CrossFit app, we need you to do that here.
Exactly.
That's so good. And I think this is a takeaway here for people who want to get a job, is like, do I need to learn a lot of data structures and algorithms, or and maybe a better takeaway, and you can tell me if this makes sense or not, is to be like, how about you build something, maybe ideally something open source, that you love so much that you can take with you to a job interview and be like, let me tell you about this thing. And then if you think there's the employer, if you think there's a fit here, then I can do this also at your company.
Exactly. And that's better than any Netflix clone or YouTube or Twitter clone that you're going to do, because you're solving problems there that have already been solved for other people. It's incredible to understand the architecture of how those things are built and like how do you scale it down, deal with different availability problems. Sure.
Yeah.
But solving your own problem and getting real users, even if it's one paying user paying a single dollar, means so much more than any clone of application that sits out there today.
Well, this is so good. This also, we had a guest on the podcast previously, Max Stoiber,
Mhm.
who successful founder, 2 exits, and then first exit he sold his company Spectrum to GitHub. Second exit he sold his company Stellate to Shopify, and now he just joined OpenAI to help them build an operating system, ChatGPT OS, right? He says the same. He's also like you. He's a very young person, and he also says, "Hey, man, everything that I have comes from me just solving my own problem, and then loving my solution so much that people were like, oh my gosh, we need you to solve our problems too because you love solutions so much."
Yeah.
You know, fantastic. I think it's important to identify here because there's people who want to get into tech who maybe because I also was a tinkerer, right? I also was like, oh, I like. So me, my big in was games. I played Prince of Persia,
Mhm.
and I was like, wow, that's a cool game. And eventually, I got so bored of games, I was like, how do you make this stuff? And then it was Photoshop and Front Page and Dreamweaver and all of this Flash, and then we got to the web. I'm curious if somebody isn't a person who like enjoys building or enjoys like is not curious about how software is built, but they still want to get into tech because of the tech money, right?
Yeah.
But they're not naturally this kind of person. What do you should they even think about getting into tech if it doesn't come naturally?
I mean, if the goal is the money, any place you try to go, it's going to be a little bit of a struggle for you because it
Yeah,
takes a long time to get to that money.
yeah,
And at the end of the day, if you want to work for somebody else, you cannot earn more than you make for them. And so tech so happens to unlock that in a way because you're able to you operate at scale.
yeah,
And so, yeah, sure, that's where you can earn those big bucks from. This is something I've learned over the past couple of years that there are many ways to express technical competency outside of building. You could have an affinity for being able to manage people, and so you may be a force multiplier in that way. There's this very well known being a 10x engineer, which is like I'm so efficient at what I do. I'm such a force multiplier in the code that I write or the way I'm able to execute that I can make a very large impact. Impact isn't just about how fast you can write code, how fast you can prompt something, how well you can do it, but also being able to coordinate and orchestrate multiple people to make an impact. And maybe you don't have to sit too close to tech for that. Or there are different levels of developer advocacy, which you will know very well. And this is something that I'm learning over the past couple of years of like, okay, are you very good at connecting with people?
yeah,
And is that what you enjoy? And are you able to, find harmony within problem spaces? I have a problem X, you have problem Y. Can we find a middle ground and some synergy there?
yeah,
And that doesn't mean you had to build anything to solve it, but you took something that was a technical solution and you fit it nicely into some sort of a puzzle.
yeah.
So are you a puzzle solver? And at the end of the day, you can fit into tech as well because you can fit into other industries. It's just like tech we associate very much with
Yeah.
I'm sitting in a dark room and coding away
Yeah.
until the morning.
I think what you said is so profound because we often associate tech with just coding.
Yeah.
But there's so many people in tech sales, in recruiting, in developer in marketing, in procurement. It's all like Netflix has a procurement division.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's really awesome that yes, people can get into tech, but assuming you need to be good at coding is a wrong assumption.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Very good. You also mentioned you can be a force multiplier by being a manager.
Yeah.
And depending on the organization, usually managers don't code,
Yeah.
or the expectation is you code, but maybe very little or so on.
Yeah.
I noticed that you and I have something. We have a lot in common. Well, one of the things is I was a manager. I was an engineering manager in 2016 when I was 23 years old.
Yeah.
And I was like pushed into it.
Yeah.
I will say it's probably because I was not the code I wrote wasn't great, and they were like, "Hey, this guy doesn't write great code, but he's really good with people, and he's good with getting buy-in from people,
Yeah.
where he speaks about something, and it's like people want to work with him."
Yeah.
And so they were like, "Why don't you just instead of writing so much code, just manage really great engineers?" And I was like, "This is okay." And I thought wrongly that managing was a step up
Yeah.
instead of a step to the side.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, cool. I'm gonna get a big promotion. I was not paid more to be a manager, but I did see more of a responsibility there because you're
Yeah.
not responsible just for your own output, but the output of others, right? I'm asking you in a very long-winded way to ask. I know you were also a manager. I think when you were 21.
Yeah.
Also, I think you fell into it. It's not something you
Yeah.
pursued. Can we talk about that, like being a manager early and what it actually means, and is it something people should aspire to?
Well, firstly, the salary part is a problem of negotiation. So the way I got into being an engineering manager is I was working at I was interviewing in 2022 for a lot of jobs. So I was working as a backend or full stack engineer at a company called Fit. They were like the number one UK mobile fitness application for like CrossFit style stuff. It was really, really cool. It kind of married my love for fitness and also for building stuff. And then there were a lot of like poorly managed things, and the company had to be scaled down. So like even all the way from the C suite level down, I think they cut like 50%. And so it was pretty brutal. But like weirdly enough, like I got that call of like, hey, I think I was on holiday or something. I don't know what, but like we need to have a chat. And I was being laid off, but I was consoling my manager. It was weird. But I was like, are you okay, man? Seems like you're going through a tough time. And he was like, are you okay? I was like, dude, I'm gonna be fine.
Yeah.
And so I was like, let's see how we can define the next part
Right.
of my career. And so I opened up Notion and I was like, let's start interviewing. And I believe I racked up 88 roles that I was interviewing for
At the same time.
at the same
Oh my
time.
gosh.
Or in sort of almost 88 processes in June. I think, yeah, June 2022, something like that. And so I was trying to understand, and I was serious about a lot of those roles. I was trying to understand, like, what are the different types of interview styles, system design, what are my strengths, my weaknesses, what types of size of companies do I like to work at? And it was a really interesting experience. And I ended up landed it with 2, 3 really solid offers. One offer was at a company paying a really high salary. It was much higher than what I was being paid actually at the previous job, which I was like, I didn't know you could get laid off and then earn more money later on. And that was really cool. And it was React, all the stuff that I love. I think it was building some sort of Jira applications or Jira extensions. I failed to remember the name of the company at that time. And what was painful was it was a 4-hour long pair programming interview process. And I was like, if I pass that, I'm fine. And then there was a second offer from this pre-seed startup in the UK. And the first one was a Swiss one, so Swiss salaries are a little bit higher. And the other one was for a UK company, and they had just started. They just got 5 million as a pre-seed round, which is pretty good as
How
a
many
pre-seed
people
round.
was it at the time?
At the time, it was 6, 7 people. So I was going to end up being the 8th person that joined, or the first engineer. And so I went through that process, and the CTO that I worked with, absolutely incredible person, and really met incredible people. And they were really good at convincing me that there was a story and something to be built here. It was a lower salary, lower perks. Actually, there were no perks. There was like, you get holidays and you get paid. So that was great. And I was like, let's take the lower paying job and let's see what this story has to unfold for us. And it was 6, 7 processes, technical designs, everything. And yeah, being 21, I was like, this is like a lot. They were looking for somebody with at least 5 to 10 years of experience, or almost nearing 10 years of experience. And
So you would have had to start when you were 11.
yes, something like that. All those baby Hello World books started on. And they were interviewing me for the engineering manager position because they wanted to hire somebody that was going to build the founding team. And so I ended up actually being offered the engineering manager position. And I was like, in my own head, I'm 21. You're asking me to build an engineering team of 10, 20, 50 plus engineers, Java backend engineers. I'd never touched Java, front end engineers, and like manage that for a fintech where we're going to be doing tier 1 bank integrations and going for an EMI license, which is in Ireland, EMI license is a gold standard EMI license. It can take some companies multiple years to achieve that. We ended up achieving that in 364 days. It was like some sort of a record. And I actually backed out of that and said, I don't think I can do engineering manager. Like I don't even know what that entails. And so they were like, we still want you. So they actually created the role around me, and they said, we'll come on board as a senior front-end engineer.
But what would possess a company to do that?
To create the role?
Yeah.
It means that they saw some skills and they saw something that this guy is going to build or add value, and he has the capabilities of an individual contributor and a manager. It's just picking the track to evolve within. And so the track that I decided was like, I know I have a track record with IC. I'm comfortable with IC. I can do IC. I can always move from IC to EM. It's harder to move, at least I thought, from EM to IC, because then I was sort of sitting further away from the technology. And it just felt dishonest with what I thought my experience was. And I wanted to learn what did it mean to be an EM there, because what it means to be a senior in one company means very different to a senior in another company. Same with EM. So I wanted to discover what that meant. So I joined as a senior front-end engineer, and I took over some agency was working on this Next.js application, and I was, overseeing how that was being built, and then had a lot of opinions on it.
Was it using App Router?
No, it was before App Router. It was before App Router, yeah.
So in the good days.
It was the good days. I knew you were gonna pull this out of me. So yeah, we're using Pages Router, but like it was all some object-oriented stuff mixed in with functional programming. It was unclear, and there was like some places where we were making 8 requests where we needed 1. Like it didn't make sense. And so what I was first tasked with is that an agency has built the initial application. You are tasked with now making it our own.
Right.
Because to inherit something is to not just inherit it in its current state, but inherit it and bake it into our engineering principles that we're going to evolve over the next multiple years. And that was really interesting, starting at a greenfield place. Some initial functionality, and like, how do we set the standard for what does engineering mean at a company? And that started building the foundations for me on like, how do I actually lead a front end team? And so then every new person onboarded was somebody that I had to, help skill up, mentor, so on and so forth. And it started to prepare me for that eventual engineering manager role, which then within the 2 years, I was promoted from tech lead to engineering manager really, really fast. The engineering manager position sort of came about because the VP of engineering was fired.
Okay.
For reason whatever, and they needed to have, they wanted to have something normal. They wanted to not have something normal, but they needed to bring some normality back because they lost an organizational figure, a leader within the company. How do they restructure stuff to make sure that there's still a balance? Like, there's this way of thinking about it where like you're flying a plane, now one engine stopped working, it's on fire. How do we stabilize the plane and make sure it's still flying while, I don't know, somebody comes and fixes the engine somehow while it's flying? Like, it was about bringing about stability. And so there were just naturally 2 people, and I'm being one of those people that just was brought on board. And then I started reporting directly to exec. So weekly meetings and what we called being part of the ORC, the Operational Risk Committee, which now for ZurichJS, we also call our weekly meetings the Operational Risk Committee. It's really funny. Kind of carries over from that. And every week I had to report about to the CPO, CEO, and CTO. What are the numbers in terms of delivery, whatever. It's Jira tickets, health of people, how are they feeling, promotion, skill, mentorship, and like it really grew from what I was given the lowest performing team. At the time, it was really, really messy of 15 engineers, majority of them being backend. And I was tasked with, bringing them to a level that we were happy in terms of delivery because we had a lot of investor pressure to deliver within a certain timeline. And wow, it was really cool that we actually managed to turn them around within 6 months to being the highest performing team in the company.
That must have felt really good.
It was an incredible feeling. But sometimes in a startup, you get so bogged down by the fact that you have to execute at pace that you don't even realize certain achievements. So it took me a long time to realize what a feat that was. Yeah.
You mentioned leadership. Also, like I think management is a more leadership position. You talked about mentoring and so on like this. I've been a really bad leader over my career, and there's been growth that allows me to recognize that, right? But I've also worked with really bad leaders, and I kind of know what bad leadership looks like, and in myself and in others. I'm curious if you've had similar reflections. Meaning, what are some ways that you've been a poor leader, if you're comfortable talking about?
Yeah.
And also, what are some just red flags of leadership in general that you see that you're like, man, it shouldn't be like that. Right? I can give you an example. Typically, when leaders expect of other people results and work that they themselves are not willing to do,
Yeah.
right? There's a great book by Simon Sinek called Leaders Eat Last, which is about the idea that, hey, if you're a leader, your main job is to serve. And if people are like, oh, I don't think this can be done, or I don't know if I can do this, your job is to do all the research and first find out that it can be done. And if they're scared to do it, you do it. You do the scary stuff. You shovel the feces, you
Yeah.
know, like, and so I see a lot of leaders who think I'm the leader, so I just get to check out
Yeah.
and go on, sip Mai Tais on the beach and then be like, hey, why aren't you guys working? That's not leadership. Yeah. So I'm curious, what are some patterns in yourself and in other peers you've seen that you think make for poor leaders? And I'm asking because I want the listeners to get almost like education
Yeah.
on leadership, what to look out for in others, but also in themselves.
I think we'll tap on this into a little bit, but there's really important distinctions to be made around enabling leadership and directive leadership. And that's a balance one has to strike. You lean too much into directing, you take away autonomy from a team, and you lean too much into enabling, and you may have a team that just dilutes its ability to direct focus.
Yes.
And so if I look into like qualities of myself, like it's the shift of going from IC to management. It's a very difficult one if you are, if you had a record of being a very capable IC. I was somebody that really strived to, I wrote a majority of the coding guidelines and set the standard for that. Quality gates in terms of how we write code, in terms of the pace that we deliver at, the way we write Jira tickets, whatever it may be, whatever standard you set and whatever dimension you operate within as an IC, it's very hard to not want to apply those same standards to other people. And so just because I hold myself to a certain level, I'm allowed to hold a team to a certain level of standard. But like, it's hard for me to make that transition to say that you need to operate at the pace or the way that I did.
Right. But do you identify as a highly effective engineer, maybe a 10x engineer?
Yeah.
Okay.
But, well, I identified as myself as one.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would call myself a 10x engineer, but I feel like I have contributed significant value in different ways that did make me a force multiplier. Whether that was a 2x, 50x, or a 10x.
Yeah.
In some places, I feel like, yes, I have been a 10x engineer. In other places, maybe a 1x, because there are certain qualities that I have a better time expressing and others not.
But the expectation of yourself is that you act as a 10x engineer.
Exactly. That is the expectation I have of myself. I need to act as a 10x engineer and do what it needs to take to be a 10x
So
engineer.
what you're saying is, as a leader, you can have that with yourself, but the moment you start to maybe have it with other people,
It can be problematic very quickly. And so a lot of it has to do with empathy and emotional regulation for yourself as a leader, because you learn very quickly that everyone has their own set of problems, which is entirely okay, which is somebody has family problems. I don't have a family. I don't have kids. I don't have responsibilities like that. I have other responsibilities. I have health issues, sure. But I have to take into account somebody else has to go pick up their kid at 4 o'clock. I have to take into account that somebody's a morning person, the other person's not a morning person. And I have to understand that I need to allow other people to be effective the way that they are effective, as long as we all have a social contract and a common understanding of what we do to support each other as a team to move forward. That's what I'm holding people accountable to team support. I cannot hold them accountable to the standard that I have for myself, because that's unrealistic. Because that is the assumption that I have everyone that is a copy of me, and then I end up having a team that isn't diverse. And you want diversity of thought to be in your team. And that is incredibly important, because otherwise, if I just have a copy of myself everywhere, then you may not end up innovating. You may not challenge your own assumptions. And if you've been operating in the same way and not been getting better results, that means that something is wrong and you need a different perspective. And that's what you need to be part of enabling.
so good. I think that's definitely super powerful leadership there, especially principle wise. You lead many things. I mean, you've been a manager at this fit company.
Yeah.
You now lead ZurichJS. You lead sort of an audience through talks of yours,
Yeah.
right? You're getting into content. And so, of all the things that you lead, and this is maybe a personal question, feel free to not answer. Of all the things that you lead, I feel like leadership really is just like tending a garden. It's like you have this garden and you're tending it. And when you tend a garden well, there's fruits that appear, literal fruits like strawberries and stuff. When you tend a garden poorly, not only are there no fruit, but the garden will slowly die.
Yeah.
And then there's weeds. Yeah. So I'm curious, in the things that you're leading, do you feel like there's fruit? And if not, then what can one do to sort of tend better?
And this incredible fruit. I mean, especially with the stuff we're doing with ZurichJS, it's like every time somebody purchases a ticket for the conference, I'm jumping with this excitement. Like literally 5 minutes before we started this podcast, I was going and I personally read every single event log and post hog, every single input field being filled, every single checkout abandonment, everything, because there's so much care that goes into it, and it is an incredible win. What was so cool was the fact that we had a couple of people actually tell us that we're not buying tickets in the blind bird or the early bird. We're gonna buy tickets when it's standard pricing or late bird pricing because we support the conference so much we want to pay a higher price.
That's amazing.
That took me a second to digest.
Yeah.
And the fruits are the smiles. The fruits are the fact that people have community, they have joy, they have friendship. We travel with my co-organizers Bogdan and Nadia, and then also our good friend Colin, who's been part of the community for some time. It's been almost a year now when he came to our first View Zurich, which is also something that we run last year. And he came and joined us at What the Stack. And then we had these yellow t-shirts that just popped up everywhere, and we're part of the What the Stack photos, and it was communities blending. And now we've built this beautiful friendship with Darko and the What the Stack team, which we absolutely love. And it's carrying us forward in ways that like I didn't think it would. And another reminder is that like those t-shirts, they were produced by Bert and Elian.
Yeah.
And I tell people that there's an open source backings to an extent to the t-shirts that have been built, because the way it was is that I sent an Instagram message to Elian because he was making for his devs.gent meetup his t-shirts, and I was like, yo, where'd you get the t-shirts done? I haven't found a good provider for those. And he said, listen, if you get the t-shirts done with us, I'll come speak at your meetup too. And I'm like, let's make it happen. I had no money in the bank account. I funded those t-shirts personally and everything personally. I foot the bill out of my own salary for ZurichJS for the first 6 months.
Wow.
And I haven't had to foot the bill since June of last year. And that was absolutely incredible. But when it comes to tending the garden, I think, again, it taps into that part of emotional regulation, which is I do so many things. Some people to an extent even think that I am a dev for Smallpdf. I'm not. I'm a full-time IC. I have to work my 9 to 5. I am writing code. I'm shipping. I'm leading teams. I take care of the entire monetization stack at Smallpdf. I'm responsible when payments aren't working over there. And when you're talking about tens of millions of dollars of payments being processed, and the sheer amount of users we have like tens of millions of users per month, a singular payment issue going wrong or dependency and not having somebody be able to fix it within a 24-hour period is detrimental from an ARR perspective. So like there's a lot of responsibility that sits in terms of defining how that looks like. On top of that, with running ZurichJS, on top of that, speaking at several conferences and running all the meetups, like I run 12 meetups per year. There's at least 100 cumulative hours against with the co-organizers that go into every single meetup, defining every single detail, producing the websites, everything. Dealing with sponsors, partners, like there's a whole part of it in there too. And then also writing CFPs, preparing talks, delivering 8-hour long workshops. I was, I think, at least at 30 plus events last year across maybe some online ones, sure, some podcasts here and there. It was a lot going on top of the side projects and other stuff in life. But so that means emotional regulation is so important, and also being part of change leadership. We onboard a lot of volunteers in ZurichJS, and we have a volunteer channel, for example, of almost 20 people now. But we haven't had a time to effectively engage those volunteers, or I haven't had time to sometimes be able to keep everyone up to date with certain changes that are happening at ZurichJS. Maybe I'm on a call with a sponsor, I'm on a call with a partner, and it takes time to write down those messages. And so like sometimes I feel like I keep people out of the loop because so many things are going on, and I could do a much better job of helping carry people with me, helping keeping people informed, and finding different methods where I call Bogdan really quickly. He's like, do you have 2 minutes on WhatsApp? Let's call, chat, you're in the loop. And that means I can effectively delegate. And when I take too much pressure on myself and I don't trust that other people can get to the same outcome I can,
Everything falls apart.
exactly the same leadership or managerial problem, I then struggle to delegate. And delegation is an amazing thing. Like I have an incredible team. I could not do this without them. They are really, really amazing. And even something I struggle with is I say I more often than I do say we, but when I do mean we, because I carry everyone in my heart with me when I do stuff. And that's the tending to the garden that needs to happen, keeping people in the loop, trusting people, enabling them, giving them what they need. Like we have this incredible guy, Aldous, that's been joining the meetups recently, and I found him through. I met Lois, who worked at Zephyr Cloud for a bit, and we met at a CityJS conference. And then through her Discord channel, I found Aldous, and Aldous has been helping us with ZurichJS, and he's going to talk with a potential sponsor this week. And I was like, "What do you need?
Yeah.
Do you need your travel covered to go to the place? Do you need this happen?" I was like, "You don't worry about the money. You have everything you need to get the job done." And this is ZurichJS isn't a company; it's a non-profit. Nobody's salaried. We're doing this all for free, but I want to give everyone the tools that they can to do what they do best and with passion and with love.
Yeah.
And if I can create that environment, then I'm happy, and that is tending to my garden. And so I feel like I'm lacking when I'm unable to do that. And so it's bringing people along.
It's so interesting because you mentioned the garden in multiple ways. I think so. One of the gardens you could say is like the things we work on, ZurichJS,
Yeah.
or your job. But another garden is your body. You talk about emotional regulation, like the mind and body could be another example of a garden also, and tending both of them will yield fruit in both of them.
Yes.
And in some ways they're like linked where you can't have fruit in the body and mind garden, let me put it another way: you can't have fruit in your projects if you don't have fruit inside.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a wonderful thing. I wanted to get your thoughts on that exact idea of emotional regulation.
Yeah.
Because again, like I've worked with some leaders. I've been the kind of leader where I was not. I can say I've said this very openly. Like 2022, I was the worst because I did not learn how to regulate myself. And I was director of developer relations at Zeta.
Mhm.
And hey, like it was bad. Like I had to go to San Francisco multiple times,
Yeah.
and then London, and I was all over the place. And I wasn't as educated on the effects of jet lag on a person.
Yeah.
And so I thought, the worst thing is everyone's like, "Hey, are you fine? Are you fine? You look tired." I was like, "Of course I'm fine." What, I was very much not fine.
Yeah.
And now I know that, hey, I'm gonna feel bad after some travel, and it's okay. And I learned how to regulate against jet lag. The first podcast episode of this month was, how do you avoid jet lag entirely, right? So I learned that, but I did not regulate well. It led to me leaving the company really in an unpleasant way. But since then, I've spoken with the CTO, the CEO, we're friends now. We hugged it out. It's all reconciled. But I had to learn that the hard way. So, on behalf of all the listeners, I want to ask you, how does one regulate themselves so that then they can also create an environment externally to themselves that bears fruit?
I think it's defining your non-negotiables and not going against them yourself. My non-negotiables is 8 hours of sleep. I am in bed by midnight. I am waking up at 8 or 8:30. I am trying to make part of it going back to the gym more. I had to let go of that a lot because of the
But
conflict
wait,
making.
you're 25, and so you're telling me you don't like go out, get drunk, have party until like 4 o'clock in the morning, and come back like tipsy and all of
Not
that.
since 2020, no.
Wow,
September 2020.
why that? Why
That
specifically?
was the so in September 2020 was when I got sick again. So I have a chronic condition. It's called ulcerative colitis. For that, I have to take medication, and so I have to take injections every single 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, and those injections are immunosuppressive injections because it is an autoimmune condition. Um, and it can be a debilitating one at that too. So it started in 2012. For that, I was on a medication called infliximab Remicade. For that, I think I had to go like for a 4 or 5 hour drip every month or two to the hospital. So I'd go out of school, I'd go get that done and everything, and it had its own side effects and issues. Then I was able to get myself out of that and off of my medication in 2016. That was incredible because that's when I had the peak of me being athletic in CrossFit, and that's when I was able to I was going to the gym 10 to 12 times a week. Now that sounds crazy, but that's because I was a CrossFit coach at the same time, or they call it CrossFit trainer because you're a CrossFit coach starting from level 3 or level 4. I'd only got my level 1 and level 2 certifications at that point. Um, and so I was up 5 in the morning to get to teach a 6 a.m. class, and I would count one session as stretching, go then teach my classes, lunch break, come back, do a weightlifting session, and I was having, I don't know, probably 10,000 calories a day too, or something like that. Probably not 10,000, but probably closer to like, 5,000 calories. I was eating a lot and I was really bulking up, and I was working towards getting a lot more competitive in the CrossFit Open. And actually managed in 2017 to be the second fittest in Switzerland in the
Whoa.
category. And then I think I was 96, like top 100 in Europe in 2018,
My
which
goodness.
was really, really, really cool. And then long story short is that, yeah, after I came back to Switzerland, eventually COVID caught up with me. I was off the medication, and COVID, or we're not sure 100% what it was, but that what I thought was it was COVID. It brought back the autoimmune condition. And I noticed it when I was at the gym because I was incredibly lethargic. And so the whole story that started in 2012 started again in 2020. And before that, I had a lot of fun drinking alcohol. I had a lot of fun going out and partying and late nights. And I enjoy it. It's great to be socialized. It's great to let loose. It's just great to have fun and not always be productive or obsessive with work. And that came later on. And so when I got sick, I was almost bedridden and having soup for 6 months. I tried to find natural solutions for it, and then eventually ended up on I think it was created in Japan, but the current medication is called Entyvio, and actually evolved quite a bit because it suppresses a subsection of your immune system around your digestive system, which means there are a little bit less side effects, and so it's really cool. And you can actually administer it at home, so that's a big quality of life change. But it meant that being bedridden and going through a lot of corticosteroid treatments and meant that prednisone, it meant that I was in a place where I could no longer work on my physical body. And so I was like, okay, if I can't do the gymming stuff, I can work on my mind. And that's where sort of the obsessive, same CrossFit style adrenaline junkie attitude came into building stuff. And that was really when I was like, I'm going to double down on my career in that way. And so that's kind of like what happened with it. And so I don't know where the question originally started off, but
it's good. That's so interesting because the same thing happened to me, right? Like for those who know me, I have this disease where I could never be super physical.
Yeah.
And so I always thought, let's invest in my mind.
Yeah.
And now that I feel like my mind is in a decent place, it's of course there's always something to learn and so on. But like this entire podcast, I think people sometimes don't believe me when I say it's like I do everything.
Yeah.
Like, cameras, lights, production, post, all of it.
Yeah.
Of course, there's AI assistance.
Yeah.
But I've been doing this for longer than AI was mainstream.
Yeah.
And so I very much relate to that. The question was, and I'm sorry I interrupted you, emotional regulation, and you said 8 hours of sleep, and then you explained why late nights and alcohol and stuff doesn't work.
Yeah.
But okay, so 8 hours of sleep is one key. What else?
One key.
Or let's double click on that 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
How do you get that? Do you just like, is it a hard, like, no matter what happens, I'm going to do as much as I can to make sure I'm in bed on time? Or
yeah,
okay,
it is. There are moments that are special. Like when I go to conferences, when are you going to be with these incredible people again? And you know what? If it's 1 a.m. and I'm going to feel crap the next day, it's not a big deal. But 90% of the time, I will stick true to that because I don't want to feel crap. I want to feel my best self. And unfortunately, with the medication, the health condition, even my best self isn't feeling great most days. But it at least is somewhere. It's somewhere in the direction. So it helps a lot. So very much, even when I'm hanging out with my friends, I have incredible friends. I'm like, they know it's 11 o'clock. They're like, okay, it's time to chill out, time to go to sleep and get ready for bed. And it's just really important.
Someone said it's not so much about like going to sleep perfectly all the time, like, because then you develop your own like neuroticism, and you get it becomes unhealthy to the point where you obsess. And so I forget who, but people say it's just about doing 90% of things right, 90% of the time. Which is not really that much. Okay, so with getting your emotional regulation right for the purposes of having a nice garden inside, then create a nice garden outside. Number one, you said, is 8 hours of sleep.
Exactly.
What else?
Or whatever hours of sleep is right for somebody else. Everyone's got their own circadian rhythm. Then another thing is really big for me is that when I'm traveling, I am not the kind of person that's waking up again at 5 a.m., 6 a.m. So that plays into that a lot too. I will try to arrive a day before a conference. I am not the kind of person that can wake up at 5, fly at 6, do the conference talk at 12, leave I have done work days where I've woken up at 5, get to the office at 9 because I live in Geneva, but I work in Zurich. So it's 4 hours away, my office, then come back. So like it ends up being a 16-hour day. Other things is food being really important. Like I will make time to have my food. I'm trying to spend even more effort trying to make sure that I'm eating the right things. I don't sacrifice quality of food above anything else. If it's getting organic eggs or milk or whatever, it's like paying attention to that and what makes me feel good. I feel really good when I have more protein in the morning instead of any carbs because then my sugar is better regulated. So I will just have scrambled eggs in the morning, and people may find it weird. I have actually salmon tartare in the morning, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah,
And
that's the most Swiss thing.
yeah, I love it. I love it. So like, how much I spend on salmon tartare in a month is like it's a problem, but I absolutely love that. And it's a special. It becomes a ritual for me. So food is really, really important. And taking the time to make sure to go to the right place. I don't have McDonald's or Burger King, and like I loved it. I used to love getting out of school, going having 20 chicken McNuggets. It was a great taste. I miss McFlurries, but at the end of the day, they didn't make me feel good. And so getting the right food is super important.
Do you think they maybe like made your sickness worse or even?
Definitely. There's certain even certain red meats that have inflammatory aspects, or the way you regulate your sugar. Like, I'm a bit more prone to being being diabetic. So I've been pre-diabetic for a very long time, but like it's never actually progressed to a bad place. It doesn't mean I need insulin or anything of the sort. It just means I need to regulate my sugar a little bit better. And so like when your body's out of whack, whether it's sugar, whether it's your hormones, whatever it may be, it just amplifies whatever the core problem is. And so a big thing also is when you're taking so many medications or having so many issues, you want to know where the symptoms are coming from. And so if you are dealing with 10 health issues at a given time, or you're eating really bad and it's giving you either stomach problems or headaches or whatever, you want to know if the symptoms are coming from your autoimmune or chronic condition, or is it from a bad day, or you drank too much alcohol, or this? Because a big problem is at some point I was on 20 pills a day. And so a doctor would ask me, what pill is doing what? And I was like, I have no idea. I'm taking 20 pills. Do you think I can decipher which one is having what effect? So like, okay, let's take every pill away, introduce pill 1 week, note down the side effects, the positivity. Second one, and you take 20 weeks finding out what worked. Almost like, in engineering maths, you're going to console log through every single pill that you have to take to figure out what's going on. And you have to debug yourself, which is a really hard thing to do. And you should be fine-tuned with your feelings. So minimizing the noise, just like you don't want to open up your console and see there are 50 warnings and 50 errors. You want to keep a clean console so you actually have an easier time debugging what's going on.
Wow. That's like the spirit of the podcast is like taking engineering stuff and using it to engineer a better life. Console log elimination diet type stuff. I'm here for. Great. I think what this tells us is the importance of an internal garden to make a great external garden and to make it bear fruit. I think everything you've hit on is sort of like universal truth, right? Good sleep, good food, good movement, good social connection. I feel like the end outcome of having a great internal garden and external garden is just a massive community around you. People who genuinely, they know the real you and they want to support the real you. Another way of saying this is the real fruit our gardens bear is the friends we made along the way.
100%. Is the incredible friends made. And that's an important thing too. Like you deal with so many different personalities between work, colleagues, sales calls, negotiations, whatever it may be, that like having people that center you is also part of your own mental health, and taking time for that is really, really important. And so like it may sound really basic to say, oh, good sleep, good food, and good friends. But it's not about just having those as a standard. It's like, what part of those are good for you, and how do you want to express those for yourself? Because good food and sleep and friends for everyone mean different things.
And also what quantities, right? Like if you have great food and good friends, great food and great exercise and great sleep, but it makes you like a hermit where you actively avoid people so I can go to the gym. Is that winning, right? Like if you're on your deathbed and you're the richest best, if you're like Brian Johnson, who maybe will die, probably will die, um, and you're like about to die, but you're fit, you're rich, you're healthy, but there's no one around you. Like, is that worth it, right? And so it sounds like the purpose of all this is really to be surrounded by great people.
And that, and also balance, because I think if you want to achieve greatness, and I absolutely love this quote, to do something that others cannot, you have to do something that others will not.
Mm.
And so that may mean sacrificing going and hanging out with your friends. Maybe for me, I sacrifice some gym sessions or going more to the gym. Like, sacrifice comes into some point, but it's, are you able to pull yourself out of that zone and take a breath of fresh air and then go and see your friends? Like, balance, I think things balance out over the long period. It's hard to balance in the short period. And so I may have a very unbalanced week, but my weekend may be very balanced.
Yeah, that's so good. We work over the long game, so to
Yeah.
speak. In audio engineering, you call this an RMS curve as opposed to a peak curve. Hey, that's fantastic. I wanted to ask you. You said you were the second fittest person in all of Switzerland with CrossFit at one point, and you have this like highly competitive like um, physical career
Yeah.
that was winning, in the words of Charlie Sheen, but also that was just winning in general.
Yeah.
But now you don't do that because of your condition.
Yeah.
Do you often look back on like, man, I used to be something? Do you look back at maybe old competition photos and you go like, man, do you look back with like sorrow at what you've lost, or like how does that? And I'm asking, and feel free to not answer, of course, it's very personal, but I ask for myself because I look at sometimes at old pictures, and I feel like, man, I used to be, so much muscular or so much this or so much that. Um, yeah, I'm curious, like how does looking back after having lost that ability, how does that affect you?
I'm grateful to have had it in the first place, because some people never even get there with or without a condition. And I'm grateful that I had the mental capacity, the physical capacity, the time, the support, the environment to even get there. And I'm thankful that I've carried so many learnings from that. The way, like, when you become a CrossFit trainer, you're taught how to coach. You're coached on how to coach. If somebody's not doing a movement correctly, you're given sort of three ways or three core ways to help them get better. And that is, you either give them a visual cue. So if they're trying to perform a movement like a snatch, you will repeat that same movement in a better, like the right mode or the right movement. You'll show them visually. Or you'll actually have a tactile feedback. So you'll tap the shoulder and be like, the shoulder should move up. Your chest should move in that direction. Or you'll say something vocal like, do this, do that. Like, people learn in different ways. And this meant that I also had a multi-dimensional approach to being able to publicly speak, teach, and go about building stuff too. I wouldn't have learned that otherwise. Or the way I also was a spinning coach at some point by mistake. And the way that happened was that I was attending the spinning class and I got a message from the owner of the gym, and she said, listen, I'm not going to make it. Do you want to teach? And I had never taught spinning before, and everyone was waiting. So I just hopped on the bike, looked at the sheet that told me what exercises at what time, and I was like, let's do it. And so it allowed me to think on my feet.
Yeah.
It allowed me to deal with multiple personalities. And also, it allowed me to think about all the different neurotypes, is what we call them. And I don't know I can't remember the specific ones, but like, some people are adrenaline junkies.
Yeah.
Some people are a bit more conservative in terms of how they feel coming to a gym. Like, you may have somebody that thrives on being pushed to the max.
Yeah.
Go on heavier weights, more reps, do this. For somebody else, if you push them too far, you're going to take them away from their pleasure of going to the gym. And maybe because they have a history with health issues, they had issues with back issues, they had maybe herniated discs. A lot of cases like that, it breaks your confidence. So if you're pushed too far, you might break again. And so learning with compassion, like, hey, it's okay. Do you want to take it down a notch? You're doing fantastic. Different ways of supporting people based on what makes them thrive. In that same way, different ways of expressing either technical architecture, different ways of expressing communication, different ways of negotiating. Because at the end of the day, everything's a negotiation, not just sales, not just tech design, not just like how many story points is this ticket going to be because I want some extra margin to be able to not, jump to the next one too quickly. Like, everything's a negotiation. And so you learned the art of being able to navigate with people coming to work on their health collectively in a what may be either a difficult or a thriving part of their life. And so they prepared you for a lot of stuff. And I'm grateful for that entire experience as a collective.
That's so good. I think that's wonderful that you say that. I think I also sense overlap between the way you were trained to be a CrossFit trainer and the way you were an engineering manager. I'm sensing like
Yeah.
similar themes, right?
Yeah.
There's a mindset, Faris, where people can look at a past experience like being number two in Switzerland and going like, man, I used to be this, I'm not this anymore, it sucks. And then that can make you bitter against the
Yeah.
world. This was taken from me. The world sucks. Therefore, I have to be mean to everybody, right? That I think we all know somebody even like this, who they feel like they've been wronged and now they're the victim and it's everybody else's problem. The system failed me.
Yeah.
Whereas you're like, no, I'm grateful for at least the opportunity. Do you agree and think that that's just a consequence of the internal work you've been able to do on your garden that gives you that outlook? And would you say then it's almost like a recipe we can extract for the listeners, if they don't want to be the bitter person, but they want to be the grateful person? Similar, like we just take the things we talked about, sleep and food and so on, and create a nice internal garden so that when something unpredictable happens, like some autoimmune condition comes and ruins our life, then our response to that is still a healthy one.
But you said it almost perfectly, which was that it is a mindset. And that mindset in and of itself also had to be trained. And I didn't always think that way. I was very hurt through that process. I struggled a lot through that process. And it's the same emotional regulation of like, why can other people still do CrossFit? Why can't I do this? Why do I feel at that? Like, at the end of the day, those negative emotions won't serve you positively. And so it's a very hard mindset shift to do. It's very difficult because it's the same, maybe values that I was instilled when I was a child, like don't waste food. Some people don't have food. And you always have to compare yourself to maybe somebody that doesn't have something. And maybe you don't find that to be the most helpful way to make a comparison with, oh, at least I have this and somebody else doesn't have that. But think about like you want to live every day as positively as you can. And I take this from somebody that was also that coached me. I was trying to aim for a 200 kilo deadlift at some point, and I failed it. I wasn't able to do it. And he said, reduce the weight. And
you're like, absolutely not.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
Right? He was like, I was like, that's a failure.
Yeah.
And he said, no, it's not a failure. You need to leave the gym every day with a win. And you go to 190 kilos, 180 kilos, you'll get back eventually. I mean, the way I learned double unders is that I spent 10 minutes every day at the end of the gym. I hit myself with the rope, it broke, this, whatever, scars, and eventually it got there, but leave with a win. Whatever that win is, even if it's a scaled down version of it. And so, in the same way, how are you either ending every single day with a win or something positive? And it's either I'm feeling really bad about this because something was taken away from me. So what is something else that I like that I can bring in to either fill this void, or what are the steps that I need to take to feel better about that? And so maybe those steps were like, okay, I was great at CrossFit at some point. I no longer am. I'm now really good at my job. I'm now really good at what else I'm building. And so maybe it's the fact that I have to fill that void with something else that I'm great at, or eventually actually find the fact that I'm at peace with the fact that I'm myself.
Yeah.
And that is going to be a continuously evolving journey. Maybe the same question would be like, if I end my conference speaking career tomorrow, my software engineering career, or I just lose the ability to do whatever I can do today, will I have that same feeling I originally did with losing the CrossFit stuff? And I think at the end of the day, it's just learning to be happy and how to, retell the story to yourself so that you can end it positively. And it's not always about comparison. It's about self-understanding and self-compassion.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think also it comes from the motivation to even have this mindset shift comes from, at least from my experience, comes from I feel awful and I don't want to feel awful. And there has to be some way to engineer a better feeling. Right. And the way you engineer it is you go like, wait. These negative feelings don't serve me. And not only do they not serve me, they're hurting other people around me. I don't want to be a hurtful guy.
Yeah.
I take no and it's kind of building empathy for those people who are like real mean people because hurt people.
Yeah.
Like I don't think they inherently want to be hurtful of everyone around them, right? It's like a defense coping mechanism. and they unfortunately haven't had the skills to engineer a better mindset. And so I think that the motivation has to start somewhere, and then we need systems around us
Yeah.
that encourage steps in the right direction,
And
right?
and it takes years.
Yeah.
If it's 10 years of damage that has been done, you can assume it may take 10 years to
Yeah.
get out of it. And so also being able to give other people and live with empathy and give other people the time and space to be like, okay, you've been like this for 10 years. You're taking the next years to work out of it. I'm there to support you
Yeah.
through that, and realizing that everyone is at a different phase in that journey. I don't think a lot of people are malintentioned with what they want to do. So we have to find ways to support them in their struggle, even though they can still hurt us in the process. And that's an important thing to recognize. Somebody can still hurt you, but they don't mean to. And so you can say that the end result was still the action that I got hurt, but even though the intention wasn't there, how do you navigate somebody through that? And so understanding people's psychology, and to the extent your own psychology, is such an important thing that transcends whatever domain that you work within.
Yeah, because also I believe these people, they don't like, they all go to bed at night at some point, because we're all diurnal. We have a circadian rhythm, and when it's in those quiet moments where they go like, man, I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have been this way, right? Like for me, it was multiple alone. So I grew up in emergency rooms, as you know, and past age 13, they never allowed someone to accompany you overnight. And so there were many times where my guardian, my mom, my dad had to leave, and I was just alone in a hospital for nights on end, alone. And of course, I can't sleep because the pain is too much. So I'm just sitting there thinking about like, man, why does this suck so much? Why do I suck so much? Why does life suck so much? Is God just a bully? Am I just like, these balloons you have that you punch them and they come back up? Am I just that? And I had to wrestle with all of this. And I was like, no, there has to be a better mindset, and I was able to engineer that. And I think you come from a similar space, it sounds like. And so I guess I'm trying to extract something for the listeners who are maybe in a similar space, or around somebody who is in a similar space, to encourage them out of it. But I think it has to just come from the inside. You have to just be tired of feeling like crap all the time.
I think nobody doesn't want to end their day positively.
Mm.
I don't know people that actively search for the negative.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, it's also easy to feel lost into what actually is a value add or positive. And it can be overwhelming because you have so many different parts of your life. You have your life at home, your life within your relationship with your partner, your life at work, at the gym. You express a different version of yourself to everyone you meet. And so if you're able to just dissect a singular part at a time, what makes me feel good when I'm with my family? What makes me feel good when I'm at work? You'll take one step at a time to figuring out, how do I express more of that positivity in every single dimension to create a holistic feeling of positivity? And I think the first part is understanding that you are lost and trying to minimize the problem space. Again, like an engineer does, isolate to which file, look at the source maps, and figure out
Which
where
line
this is.
Yeah.
Do you have enough observability and monitoring and alerting built into you just to make sure that the monitoring isn't the heart rate one at the hospital, but to make sure you don't get there?
Man, that is like so on brand for this podcast. I wanted to ask you, so we're talking about mindset.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to look at someone like you and be like, wow, this guy is like, especially now after all the things you've shared, right?
Yeah.
This guy is like so wise, and he's such a great manager, and he's super handsome, and he wears these like golden glasses, and he organizes a great conference, and he's got a great community. So I think it's very easy to think very highly of you. And I think a lot of that is valid. But you say something that I want to double click on, which is so profound. You say that visible work gets praise as the things that we're talking about, but invisible work gets leverage. And I would add to this, if I'm allowed, invisible work also builds character. Another way of saying this, so a friend of mine, not a guest on the podcast yet because I'm very nervous and intimidated by him, is Sean Wang, Swix. And he says, people praise you in public for the work you do in private. And so I think it's just worth recognizing that a lot of the character you've built, that has been built in you, is fruit of the internal regulation work you've been doing. So there may be people listening who are going like, okay, but like in private, I just consume. I just scroll TikTok, play Fortnite. I do all those things, but I also build, right? If somebody's listening to this and they feel inspired, oh man, I better like steward my private time better,
Yeah.
what are some ways they can do that?
Firstly, I doom scroll too. We all do this.
Okay.
And then I'm always secretly thinking, Zach Jackson's done a great job building this infrastructure that allows me to consume content. So yeah, shout out to RSPAC and everything that he does also do there.
Yeah.
At ByteDance. But yeah, it's difficult because like some of us relax through consuming content, and so it's important to relax. Um, I really enjoy, my favorite time is in airplanes or going on walks,
Mm.
because it is just moments that I have no Wi-Fi connection on the plane. I really love going on the plane from Geneva to Berlin because I could just sit with my own thoughts
Yeah.
and just think. I can walk and I can just think about my day and stuff like that. And what's so important about that is that I'm not consuming even sometimes music. I am just allowing free space for thought. And some people may not consider that productive. That is incredibly productive because you have such a web of thoughts inside you that if you can start to untangle them in the slightest way, you're then benefiting your direction towards clarity in the following
Yeah.
day. And I think if you can start finding moments where you're able to detach yourself from consuming, and it doesn't mean you have to jump straight to building.
Yeah.
Some of the best builders don't answer questions immediately and they don't go straight to building. They go straight to challenging assumptions using whatever RAIDs frameworks if you want to, understanding the risks, assumptions, issues, dependencies, so on and so forth. They go to planning, they go through creating multiple options, and then they start building. The building is the 20 or 10% that happens at the end. And so you don't have to feel productive. You have to just realize what may end up being productive.
Mm. That is really, you don't have to feel productive, but you have to realize what may end up being productive. Um, Incredible. Wow. Thank you. Speaking about being productive, you've obviously experienced promotions,
Yeah.
given them and received them, right? I'm curious for those listening who maybe haven't been promoted in a while, who want to be promoted. Um, you say this. You say promotions. They're not about output, but they're about reducing cognitive load upwards.
Yes.
It's interesting because I think I can share this. If I can't share this, I'll get in trouble. But my former manager at IBM, really great guy, Carter, he left, and I asked him. He wasn't ready for this question, but he was about to quit. And I asked him. I said, "Hey, it's been a real pleasure working with you over the past few months. Um, as my manager, if there was one thing you could change in me, you could improve in me, what would it be as a favor to my next manager?"
Wow, nice.
Yeah. And he said, he was like, "Whoa, man, I wasn't ready for this, but let me think." And then he spent a lot of time thinking, and his answer was, um, he was like, when you get frustrated, everybody feels it. And I was like, yeah, I know that. But he was also like, I think you've started doing a really good job of managing up. He was like, obviously nobody's perfect. As a manager, I have my blind spots, and he's like, you have done it a few times, where you manage up, you sort of, you see where I'm lacking, and you don't be like, wow, you suck, you're the worst manager. Instead, he's like, you support me towards being the kind of manager you want me to be. You expect me.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's really awesome. And I think you should do more of that. So this was his feedback. The negative was, I tend to wear my heart on my sleeve. And if I'm frustrated with something, everybody knows, and they feel bad, because the negative feelings, unfortunately, can be contagious. And he was like, the positive thing is you manage up really well. You say that's what gets you promoted, is when you are able to reduce cognitive load upward, when you're able to steward the managers or whoever is up above you manage to steward their time with honor and responsibility. Say more about that. Like, if let's assume somebody's listening to this and they're like, man, I haven't been promoted in 2 years.
Yeah.
I wish to be promoted. How?
I like to rephrase it from managing up is one skill and one part, but peace of mind,
Okay.
which is how much peace of mind am I giving my manager? And I once received, and I didn't know understand this was a compliment, and now I understand it's a compliment. My manager, not at the current company, but at a previous company, was, I don't think about you, and that's a good thing. I have so many fires to deal with in a day
Yeah.
that I'm dealing with problems, and the fact that your name doesn't even come up
Yeah.
it means that I don't have to worry.
Yeah.
And Sure, when you're at a more junior level, mid level, or even a senior level, like it's good for a manager to pay attention to what you're doing. But at a more staff or even really senior level, you have to have your space and autonomy and not cause a problem.
Yeah.
And so, if I'm able to give my manager peace of mind, whatever delivers that peace of mind, it means that they can go and work on the kind of stuff that allows them to grow into the next role. And promotions don't just happen because I'm better at my job.
Yeah.
They happen not because I want more money. They happen because of organizational shifts. And so I phrase this in a really funny way. My recent manager asked me, what do I want to do with my career? How do I want to grow? And do you want to be on the IC track? Do you want to be on the manager track? And I told him, I've done both.
Yeah.
I can be an IC, I can be a manager. I can tell you if I want to be a manager, but if there's no space in the organization for me to be one, that answer means nothing
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
I see if there's space, sure, I can grow, but maybe there's no need for a principal. And so I told him that I'm like at a menu at a restaurant. And you can go, and if you've got a big open wallet with a lot of cash in it, you can have a starters, you can have a main course, and you can have a dessert.
Yeah.
The starters may be my IC skills, the dessert may be my managerial skills, and sure, maybe you want both, and you can have a big main with it too. But what are the skills you want to subscribe to? What is the meal that you want to eat? What is the appetite of the organization?
That's so good.
And so if you understand that, just like I got my promotion from tech lead to engineering manager when the VP left, that was the organizational gap that was created. And so how are you able to smell change? The first thing is peace of mind. Like he doesn't make me or she doesn't make me worry. That's an easy yes to go up.
Yeah.
Just like I love it when other people give me peace of mind. I love clarity and confident thought and backed up confident thought. Not confident as in I know this works this way and I haven't done any research to validate it, but either I don't know, but I will find out, or I know and this is why I know. Somebody tells me, I assume this, I don't know, maybe as far as I know, it gives me doubt. It makes me feel the need to micromanage and like, oh, whatever answer you give me, I'm not going to take it at face value. I'm going to have to dig in and validate and duplicate the work. I'm not getting peace of mind. But going back to this like organizational shift stuff, are you working in a startup? Are you working in something that's VC backed, revenue based, profit making? These are different aspects about your business that you need to understand to know how do you position yourself so that when an organizational shift happens, and this is harder in companies that aren't experiencing hyper growth or nearing, funding rounds or going through massive layoff shifts. How do you prepare yourself to be the no-brainer next option?
That's awesome.
And so that answer will always lead to it depends like any other engineering question.
Yeah, but it's also, I think, a great general direction of like, the more peace of mind I give upwards, but also laterally, is better positioning me to be this no-brainer option because like you save the organization so much stress.
Exactly. And peace of mind doesn't mean quiet.
Yeah.
It just means you're a confident foundation upon which a house can be built.
That's awesome. You're reliable and stable.
Yeah.
Incredible. I wanted to ask you about confidence. You're obviously a very confident person. And you'll maybe disagree and be like, I have my own insecurities, whatever, man. Everybody has that. But externally, you present very confident.
Yeah.
I've struggled with overconfidence.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you're arrogant. I'm not saying you're overconfident. I wouldn't. In fact, you wouldn't be on the podcast if you were, frankly. But I have struggled with overconfidence many times. I've struggled with being also very confidently wrong, like an LLM. One of your principles is to speak in proposals, not apologies.
Yeah.
I hear that and I like that, but I'm concerned with, but what happens when you need to apologize? Like how do you balance strong confidence with also being human and being liable to make mistakes? Because I've learned from negative experience where I project a lot of confidence and then I'm really dead wrong.
Yeah.
And I do have to apologize later. And thankfully, I feel like the more validation I get from listeners of the podcast, bro, like I show up on Spotify Wrapped and I'm like confidence boost, and it's, I feel like the more genuine confidence you have, the less counterfeit overconfidence you have. And when you're truly like peak confident, you can confidently apologize, be like, hey, that was the wrong call.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I messed up. I hope to do well enough in the future that you put some faith in me again that I've lost, right? But I'm curious, how do you balance like confidence versus overconfidence versus the other side, which is like being so not confident that you're kind of a downer to everybody?
It is that human part. It's humility that's at the center of it. And that also adds to you being reliable. Not only can you be reliably confident in giving good answers, but you reliably bring up when you are wrong and course correct. And so very often when we would do these operational risk committee meetings, we would put a lot of tasks and a lot of things in red in a traffic light system. Something is red, it's really bad. Something is orange, it's okay, but needs to be paid attention to. Something is green, it's healthy, you don't touch it. Anytime something was not green, you had to dictate what a path to green was. And so it is completely okay to be wrong, but are you able to then be the pillar on which you can get back to your right answer? And more often than not, the smartest person in the room isn't the one that is right the entire time. It is the person that wants to be right so badly they're the first to admit they're wrong. And that's part of it all. And it is very scary when you're on stages and you are at workshops and you're seen as the person that has to deliver the right answer. I was delivering an 8-hour workshop once on Next.js architecture, React performance, and we were talking about, I can't even remember what we were talking about, but we were talking about I think type of nan, not as number, and I gave the wrong type of what it was because we didn't run it into a console or anything like that. I gave the wrong type, and I did that right before lunch. And then nobody questioned it. I came back after lunch and I just realized I messed up really badly. And I had to come back and the first thing I said, listen, some of you may or may not notice. And this is the dangerous thing when you publicly speak, because sometimes either you're overly confident or you're so respected in what you do because you're placed in this as this figure or as this person that a conference body is backing up, that some people may take your word for truth, even if it's wrong. And then spreading that misinformation can be really, really dangerous. And so I had to, after lunch, say, hey, listen, you may have not even noticed, but when you look this up, I said something wrong. I just wanted to clear everything up before we move forward. And for a second, people were just like, oh, I didn't even notice that, but like he's bringing it up and it's kind of weird. And like, why did he not know something so basic? But then we just proceeded to move forward. And afterwards, I thanked everyone and I told them, hey, I'm a human being. You just sat through me talking for 8 hours straight. And I didn't even finish. Of technical content that if I do not make a single mistake through, I am not a human being. And so I appreciate you being part of the journey with me and allowing me to have the space to be wrong once or twice and trusting me that I will bring you back to the right answer. And that I will always try to do.
That's so good. Man. Okay, so it's really being confident, but also being confident in your humanity to make mistakes and being also confident in your mistakes. Because I think a lot of times I struggle with like, was that a mistake? Maybe it wasn't. And how can I cover up this mistake? And how can I cover it up confidently? But it's more about, wait, no, that was a mistake. I did mess up, but now let me take confidence in my mistake and apologize for it confidently. So it's not like you lose confidence when you make a mistake. I think this is the main takeaway is like, that's no reason to lose confidence, but you confidently own your mistake. That's what gets you respect in the end, right?
Yeah, and then this becomes even scarier at times where you may not be wrong, but your opinion may differ, perspective may differ from others, and also you may know something right, but how well do you know it to a certain level of depth? Like, and this is something I experienced a lot in the last year, where like I'm delivering a conference talk on, again, Next.js architecture, React, Tan stack, whatever it is, monetization stuff. Like payments I feel comfortable in because like it's unlikely that a lot of front-end engineers will know about payment stuff, and I know a lot about payments for a front-end engineer. But there are a lot of people that know a lot about stuff about React, and I spent a lot of time digging into it. But like when I gave my conference talk at React Summit in New York, Mark Erickson, for those who don't know Mark Erickson, he's an absolutely awesome person and has been maintaining the Redux library and just been taking charge of the React community for such a long time. He was in the audience for my talk.
Oh, no.
Tanner was not at that talk, but he also gave a talk at the conference. And at the same time, on the other track was somebody from the React team giving a talk, and my room was still full. That's nuts. And then separate times, you were in the audience for my talk, and then made a post on LinkedIn. Daniel Afonso wrote the book on Tanstack query. When I gave a ZurichJS workshop with him in London, we gave a 9-hour workshop together at 3 parts, also with Mateus. And my part was a lot of it on Tanstack query, and he was doing the testing part. And I'm like, the dude who wrote the book on what I'm teaching about right now is in the front row. And even though we're great friends now, like you have to self-realize, like, oh my, how much am I seeking other people's validation when they're the perceived experts in the stuff that I'm talking about, and when do I determine that I'm the expert in the stuff that I'm talking about? And so it's not even about when you're wrong, but also how do you deal with the pressure of so many people that may be knowledgeable. You may have the 10x engineer at your company where he shows up once a month. He's not even at half the stand-ups, that kind of person that like you give him a problem, he's done it before you can even take a deep breath.
Yeah.
And it's intimidating to be in your ear those kinds of people that you may not even say anything in the first place, let alone the right or the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And so that's also a different thing to overcome when it comes to confidence.
Yeah. I just want to very clearly say on record that those people you mentioned, like this 10x engineer who shows up to like nothing but who gets everything done, those people are highly qualified. Like you're intimidated by them because they're excellent.
Yeah.
Like I'm intimidated by Swix because he's really like brilliant. Like his AI conferences are so cool. I'm slightly intimidated by Sarah Drasner. Like we consider each other friends. At least I consider her a friend. And I know she does too. And bro, like she's the VP of software engineering at Google. She's like Android, Gmail, Google Drive, Google.com. Name anything, and she's the boss's boss. You know what I mean? And so it's intimidating. But you know what these people do really well? I named 2 of them, Swix and Sarah. What they do really well is they steward that position well, meaning they know that they're in a sense powerful by virtue of their career standing and their position. And they use that position of power to eliminate your imposter syndrome. So there's been many, Kent C. Dodds, right? Yeah. Also a highly influential guy, wrote the foreword to my book. He is also well-known, well-respected, and he knows that. And so what he does with that is so beautiful because like he makes it a point to remember everyone's name he talks to at a conference, which you have any idea how many people that is? That's a lot of people. But he always addresses them by name, and he notices like people hovering around him who are like scared to say hi because, oh my gosh, it's Kenzie Dodds. Yeah. And so what he'll do is he'll make the first move, and he'll make the first move in a welcoming way by smiling. And I think for anyone listening, if you're a 10x engineer or if you're in a position of some type of authority, that comes with the responsibility to steward it well and remove the intimidation in other people. Yeah. And I've seen this go horribly wrong, where instead people in these positions use it to amplify the fear in other people. Yeah, I am better than you, man. You better like own up, you know? And I think those people, unfortunately, just don't deserve those positions. And it's not their fault. Some people, without knowing, just they inherit these positions, but they're not like emotionally, mentally ready to steward them well. I think maybe the president of the United States, right? Unfortunately, is somebody who can't steward his position very well. And I know you maybe don't want to comment on it because you're from Switzerland. But
reality is where we thrive.
No, but I think he just can't steward it, and it's quite unfortunate. But I want to say this very clearly, because if anyone listening is in a position where they are intimidating to other people, you better steward that very well, you know? And it's I want that to be an intentional thing. Okay, I wanted to bring before you one area that I failed, that you address. You talk about this, and I think it's so cool because others can learn from you as I have learned from you. I've said multiple times, my worst job that I've done in terms of interpersonal work is a tie between 2 companies, G2I and a company called Zeta. And I was a horrible person between these 2 jobs for various reasons, mostly because I couldn't regulate myself very well. At both companies, I failed because I was just an engineer, meaning I was like, I'm here to build great systems and fix bugs and really just build the best possible products. And I tell you what, man, at G2I, I built awesome products. I did AI before AI this was like 2019, and I built a beautiful AI system where G2I is a hiring marketplace for developers. So their business model is companies like Uber come to them and say, hey, we're starting a new project. We need 3 engineers for 9 months. And then G2I is like, yes, we have the right people. They send them to Uber. Uber pays the engineer's salary plus a commission to G2I, right? When I worked there, I built an incredible AI-based vetting system where people apply to be G2I engineers en masse, thousands. And when you upload your resume and your code challenge, I built an AI system that would read your code challenge and then give your code challenge an AI score. Like this person, they fetch and use effect, so minus points. They, they don't have a dependency array and use effect, so now it's an infinite loop, minus points. And so the rubric was the React documentation. It was like so my AI system knew the React docs well, knew the best practices, and graded everyone automatically. And so if you're a recruiter, you don't have to do anything. You just open a dashboard. You're like, okay, AI says 5 out of 10. I'm just going to quickly skim. Yes, I agree, 5 out of 10. And with each rating, the AI system would get better, 2019, this kind of work was like unheard of, right? And so I built that, but I was a real a-hole while building that because I was this 10x engineer who made people feel bad. I was this person. And so my failing here was I thought, I'm just an engineer. And then people said, oh, but we're struggling for money. Not at G2I, not at Zeta, but obviously they're both startups. And so they have funding rounds, they have to deliver value. I was like, but that's not my problem. My problem is to build this AI thing. You have a belief that you can't just be an engineer in organizations. You've got to contribute value to the business. So in terms of business value, you've got to think about revenue and how you can move that needle. You've got to think about how can you reduce cost. Especially in startups, you've got to think about, hey, how do we position the startup so that we can get a higher valuation, maybe IPO? And you talk about it's not just engineering, but it's being a part of an organism and an organization. That's awesome because for me, I learned this like much later in my career. For those listening who are thinking in the mindset like, hey, I'm just an engineer, it's not my problem. What would you say to them to help them kind of get a more holistic picture?
You're at the end of the day part of risk management. And so when you're early on in your career, you don't have to care about the other stuff except engineering because you're being really good at contributing towards a code base. That is the that is the priority. The priority later on is contributing to the wider business because when you're a junior or mid-level, you have a technical lead steering that problem for you. You don't have to deal with that. As you go to a certain level in your career, then there's less steering. What I felt was when I was an IC and I had a tech lead, I had my hands off the wheel a little bit and I could let somebody else drive the car, but I was also, helping a little bit with the destination, the map. Oh, we can stop here, we can have some coffee here, we can go for a little break. And that was really, really nice because I was protected by this bubble. But then when I got to being an engineering manager or when you're a staff engineer, the bubble bursts. And so I'm faced with the full depth and breadth of the problem space that the business has to deal with. And so you have to be not only there to ship whatever code it is, and actually you may end up writing worse code when you end up being at a more senior level because you're there to say, hey, this patches this, and we're saving this amount of money. Not like it's the perfect, it's the most performant, it's the most pragmatic solution right now because there's business risk associated with it. So you're there to make sure, again, you're in risk management. So when we get to a point of technical due diligence, what are the things that a potential, acquirer is going to say? What is our testing practices look like? What does our technical documentation look like? What is the performance, the scalability of the application? What is the bus factor of the team? How does the backend structured authentication, security, all these little small things that are going to be looked at? And so I'm a front-end engineer. Why do I need to care about what the API contracts look like? Why do I need to care about what are the limiting factors or how much DevOps is caring about the infrastructure cost with how many API requests are being made? It's because this has a wider business impact, which will eventually make its round trip back to the front-end team. Because the day that we're spending more money than we can actually make on infrastructure, jobs may be cut. We get a lower valuation. We don't get as much bang for our buck in terms of equity. So it impacts the wider team in general, or how relaxed the culture can be. If you have high-performing autonomous teams, you can flexibly come in and out of the office however you want. If you're not performing, maybe nobody gets to work from home and you get to all have to come to the office and you have to work like this and there's more restrictions. And so you want to open up the realm of possibilities to be able to have the freedom to operate the way your team can best. And that means you have to have the heart of the business in your hands to an extent. And so that does mean, okay, we're making 20 requests to the backend here. How do we shave it down to 4? How do I understand the system holistically to make sure when thing X happens and I'm off on holiday that it's not crippled? How am I disseminating information? And so at the end of the day, like, you have to just focus on making sure that, again, you are giving peace of mind to make sure you're not a risk contributor, but you are alleviating risk from the business, wherever that risk may be. I'm not a lawyer, so I cannot alleviate legal risk, but maybe I understand enough about GDPR with the lawyer to be able to understand if our consent management system within our front end is posing a legal risk to us, or the way we're managing sanctioned countries to be able to know if we have to accept payments or not and what's going on there. And so, you know, I'm not going to dig into certain experiences because I cannot, NDAs and all, but there are certain instances where you can reduce business risk with a single line of code, because maybe you're stopping something from happening just by adding a single if condition, but that would have had an impact of millions of dollars or even a couple of $100 in terms of how much risk management is happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I would say.
Interesting. I know some engineers who I consider both the best engineers at a company, but also at the same time the worst engineers at a company. I mean, I was even one of them. But I'm talking about a specific type where they are so tunnel visioned on their engineering role. And I'm talking senior engineers, even worse,
Yeah.
where they're these TypeScript guys, who you can't use the type anywhere,
Yeah.
and you can't have TS ignore, and everything has to be perfect at a code base level. Everything has to be unit tested, 100% test coverage, or I'm not moving. We have this big business bug to patch and this big problem, but the code base is so unmaintainable that I'm not going to do anything, right? And so it's these divas who are like the polar opposite of what you're talking about. Because what you're talking about is, hey, I'm part of a system, and I'm here for the organization first, and for code quality second. What would you say if you were managing one of these guys? Would you fire them? What would you do?
But not everyone has their place. Like, what I'm describing is also more of a product engineer role.
Mm.
And so in the organization that I'm in, with six-ish front-end engineers, that makes sense that each engineer owns more than just this slice. If you are in a team of 100 engineers, you need those specialists that are going to call you out on things that you're doing right or wrong. But as a manager, you can also not override the call, but be like, this isn't the right time to make that call. I've dealt with these so-called divas before who have built like, AST systems, and like you have built like, I think I was working with somebody who was incredibly talented and smart, and we were lacking type safety in our translation system. And so he built an entire way to a custom system to be able to manage type safety with translation strings and so on and so forth for multiple languages. And he did it incredibly fast. He explained it in a demo session to all of us. Nobody understood how it worked. But he did something that improved the developer experience for everyone. And so that fits very well on a large organization that needs a DX team. And DX team will have their technical priorities that do not have to care about business priorities. But then you have the business teams, which are less technical. And the manager's job and the leader's job is to coordinate harmony across business considerations and technical considerations. Because the business is going to sometimes push more money, squeeze things faster. The manager has to be like, no, they need this amount of holidays, this much peace, coordinated this way. Somebody needs to take sick leave here. This is a priority. If you do not pay down the tech debt, your interest is going to go up. Just like if you do not pay your credit card bill, it's going to get painful at some point. And so your role is creating the space to have harmony within all the engineers. But if you have engineers that cannot understand each other, that is where you have a problem of being able to help people work and grow with their communication skills. There's nothing such as, unless you have a fireable offense, of like purposefully going and stealing API keys and selling them off somewhere else, or selling company information. Like, those are like fireable offenses. There's no such thing as like, I don't dare anyone use any and ruin our type safety, and then that's it. We're calling it a day. So it's all about, can you make sure that you can bring the team to the right level of friction and frictionlessness so that you're able to move forward fast enough, but you're able to challenge each other enough to make sure you're evolving. And this sits really nicely into how the 4 stages of team growth, which is teams form, they storm, then they norm, and they perform. And that norming and storming can go back and forth a little bit. And that storming phase is so important because you are at each other's necks in terms of what's the right thing to do, how do we do it, how do we work together, what's the language that we use. I'm somebody that uses a lot of emojis to communicate, probably related to my age, but like I like to express emotion how I communicate, because maybe sometimes when somebody doesn't express emojis to me, I don't know how to interpret it.
And also sometimes, like when you have formal communication, you say things like skibbity and no cap and
Exactly, right? Or you use the passive aggressive smiley face in Slack. Which would ruin my thumbs up. I cannot comprehend thumbs up. It has to be a heart or nothing. Either you're in it or you're out. Okay is like a thumbs up is like a CEO's message, like okay, message received. It's like the equivalent of the double check on WhatsApp. But yeah, that's simply it. So can you storm through it healthily, and does the team break apart, or do they come enough together to build that social contract to move forward?
Yeah, incredible, man. It's so good. I want to let's start wrapping up. We could talk. We've been talking since like 7 p.m. yesterday, and it's now almost 24 hours. Anyway, I'll save the audience listening to 24 hours of our conversation. But I wanted to talk to you about ZurichJS.
Yeah.
Because it's happening. It's in September.
Yes.
First time ever, but definitely not amateur. And it's going to be incredible. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm excited to speak there. I know there's going to be some great speakers in Zurich. What do you want us to know about it, and how can people participate or get involved if they want?
So easiest place to go is conf.zurichjs.com. There's also ZurichJS.com, which is the meetup website. And so we're actually working to reduce the confusion between the two, because they both get a lot of traffic.
Honestly, I was looking for the conference and I ended up on the meetup website, and I was like, what is this? Can I suggest just like a banner on top above the header saying, if you're looking for the conference, click here?
Already have it now.
As of when? You didn't have it last night?
Shipped it last night.
Ah, come on. That's awesome.
It's a black banner that sits right at the bottom of the nav bar.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I just love getting things shipped. So yeah, it's happening in September. We've got the conference website, and getting involved is super easy. Either CFP is open to speak. We've already received 100 submissions. It's not even been a month that the CFP's been open. Awesome. It's 1 day, 1 track, which means it's super hard to fit everyone in, but like we're trying to introduce formats that allow that, such as panels. There's a workshop day, there's a community day. It's going to be almost 4 days long, even though it's 1 day, 1 track, awesome. Which is like a speaker hangout day afterwards. We're going to have the speaker's dinner, of course. It's going to be really, really special.
How many talk slots are there? And you said the call for papers is open. So if somebody wants to speak, you can go conf.zurichjs.com and apply to speak.
Exactly. And that'll direct you, you'll have a place to go to the CFP page right under your beautiful face.
How many talk slots did you say?
So right now we're judging at around 14 talk slots.
Okay.
5 of those are gone. Of course, we have 5 people in the lineup so far. The panel option is expanding that. And then also we have workshops. So that will expand that even further. And it's a challenge because we don't want to have sub 20-minute talks for full length talk, which is really hard to fit quality content into. So we do want 25, 30 minutes. So 30 minutes is the full length talks. And then lightning talks tend to be 5 to 10 minutes, but we actually are making lightning talks 15 minutes. It's a little bit higher than normal. And this is because the Swiss audience tends to like really advanced content. Really, really cool stuff. I mean, like, CERN is in Switzerland. There are a lot of cool things happening in Switzerland. A lot of PhDs in Switzerland, ETH and EPFL. You recently spoke at EPFL when we met in November. So yeah, a lot of talented folks coming there. So the content needs to be really, really advanced. And so speaking slots end up being a little bit less. But we're finding ways to expand that. We were even considering and debating like, how much money do we need to make it a 2-day conference? We were figuring that out. But for the moment, we're taking it as it goes. We're figuring out our sponsorship strategy. We are already going to announce our first gold sponsor in a couple of weeks. That has been locked in the books. We're really excited about that. And we're talking with also some, we're looking at some interesting things and potential speakers or guests that we think could be really cool for the conference. So a couple of things are being kept on the wraps. Cool thing that we're doing is that we do, because I work in payments monetization, actually all the ticketing system is custom built. Whoa. Everything is custom built. All the CFP management, everything is custom built. We've actually got a lot of compliments from it recently, and we're iterating on it really fast. But the cool thing is that we take the foreign exchange burden. So the conference is in Swiss francs. We got to pay everything in Swiss francs. But if you live in Germany, you will see your ticket price in euros. You will never have to think about currency conversion. Same for last week or this week, we just shipped GBP. So in the UK, you have your price adjusted tickets there. And that means that you don't need your Revolut card. You can pay it on your credit card, which means you get to benefit from your travel insurance and stuff like that in case you're sick or you're not able to make it to the event. We're finding ways to make it super accessible.
Awesome.
And that's a big priority for us.
Yeah, that is so good. Really, really incredible. You said something about lightning talks. Indeed, I think 15 minutes is really long for lightning talks, but as a meetup organizer myself, you either have like scheduled 15 minutes lightning talks,
Yeah.
or you have lightning talks that are 5 minutes, but then they end up being 15 minutes anyway, because I just have a few more points, guys. And so I think it's great that because I think everybody, including speakers,
Yeah.
miss and underestimate how fast time goes when you're actually speaking, right? And so I just want to applaud. I think that's a really great decision to just get it out of the way. Look, this is going to be 15 minutes.
I mean, when I was speaking at React Summit in New York, I had to go through 128 slides in 20 minutes.
Oh my
gosh. That was tough.
Yeah.
And there are times where I've had to give hour slots, or 20-minute slots are 15-minute slots are tough for me. But yeah, a couple cool things. We've got Scott Tolinsky coming, so Syntax FM fans. That is going to be really cool.
Yeah.
Ramona Schwering is confirmed. She has incredible storytelling when it comes around security, Lord of the Rings stuff. Absolutely awesome. Dominic Dorfmeister, Tan Stack Query legend, and I'm so excited. I'm going to be speaking also at React Vienna I think in a couple of months. Also, so I'm going to be meeting him before the conference. It'll be really, really cool. And who else? Of course, yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely cool. And then the first person that we had confirmed, which we think he's just going to be incredible for the hallway track, and the way that he speaks. I saw his Twitch stream the other day. Is Daniel Rowe.
Oh,
who's like
good old.
the leader of Nuxt, and like I promised him at some point I will build a Nuxt module. So this is me holding myself accountable in this own podcast that I will do a Nuxt module on payments or something at some point. But Daniel's just got such awesome energy, and I love his talks every time he does it. And we're really excited, and we want each speaker to talk about what they're passionate about. So we're trying to keep this really free and open, and we're prioritizing also the hallway track because we think a lot of the learning happens there too.
Yeah, incredible. I think you're absolutely right. I think the hallway track is the track to be in. So incredible. Well, listen, Faris, it's been such a pleasure, man. You are just an incredible leader. Somebody who, I mean, just even talking to you about off camera about the nitty gritty of organizing this conference and all the affordances you're making for the attendees, but also the speakers, also the sponsors, shows me, and this discussion really shows me that you really like pull out all the stops. Like you take care on care on care. Even when I visited Switzerland just briefly last year, there was he came and got me from the airport. There's just so much care that goes into it, and I think this is not for nothing, right? I think it really comes back to you, but also it affects the broader garden around you and bears fruit everywhere. So with that, on behalf of myself, all the listeners, man, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been absolutely incredible. We're gonna have a great weekend, man.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. All right, let's go get lunch.
Let's do it.
Right, take care. Thank you for joining my discussion with Faris Aziz. What a guy. What a skilled person. What a self-aware. Honestly, Faris is significantly younger than me. And if I knew half the things he knew at that age, man, I wonder where I'd be today. In any case, I hope you got what you were looking for. And I hope you've really embraced the things he talked about, specifically taking care of your garden so that you can build a better garden outside when you take care of the one inside, getting promoted, being a manager. And of course, I hope to see you at ZurichJS. Again, the link to that is in the show notes. If you're learning from and or enjoying this content, then a great way to help the podcast, honestly, without like giving us money or sponsoring or anything, is literally by just sharing it. Make it known. If anything you heard here today is worth sharing, then please share it on any social media, X, LinkedIn, whatever it may be. If you feel like you can make clips or something and share your favorite portions, that would be a huge help. Anything, or just tell your friends. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, then if you leave a review, any review up to 5 stars, that would be super helpful. And if you're on YouTube, dropping a like on the video and maybe even subscribing to the channel if you haven't yet would also be helpful. Those are just some ways you can help. Of course, no obligation or anything, but this is done for you. And if there is value, then I'm sure you want to make that value also discoverable. For now, Thank you so much for joining the podcast. Thank you for enjoying it with me in the discussion with Faris. And most importantly, thank you for your interest in engineering.